Were you fantasy planning? Were you thinking also, at the start of 2024 that you could get more done than you thought, simply because essentially you thought there were more hours in the day than there actually are? The key here is to set goals to grow. You set goals to move closer to what you want. Don't make it a fatal flaw that you didn't achieve all your goals.
I think if you do this particular step that we're going to be talking about today, it'll change everything.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. Hello, Dr. Humans. Kristeen here from Editing World, and I have a confession to make. So we tried a new software to record the podcast. We'd heard wonderful things about this software. It was supposed to be the best thing since sliced bread in the podcasting, recording world. It made a lot of promises it did not live up to. I don't know why, but it sounds like I'm underwater. So just in case you were wondering what on earth happened to the audio, but after the episode 65 and episode 66, we'll be back to our usual sound quality. So thank you for bearing with us through the technical issues. We hope you still get a lot out of the podcast. And without further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
Hello, our beautiful friends, our Dr. Humans, and welcome to 2025. As promised, we're going to set you up for the new year. You've had this beautiful Christmas break, you've had your time off, you've put some joy back into your system, and now it's time to get a little bit serious again, because 2025 matters, doesn't it? 2025, a whole year ahead of you, a clean slate. This is your opportunity to create but create specifically what you want in your life this year. So we want to support you to do that. And so today we are giving you one particular step that we want you to add into your 2025 intention setting, goal setting, big dreaming that we hope you're all doing. All right. So this is coming with the assumption that all of you guys value yourselves, you value your time and your resources enough to sit down and give yourself at least 10 minutes, ideally more like half an hour, to sit and think about what you want for 2025. So this step that we want you to add into your 2025 planning, goal setting is something that you probably never ever heard before. And it's something that's come from experience in terms of being people, Kristeen and I, who have been setting goals, big goals, trying to stretch ourselves year after year. And this is a step that if you can add this in, it's going to support you to be bolder, more audacious, more committed to your goals, and more trusting of yourself in the process. How's that sound, Kristeen?
Yes, I love this. Okay, so this is the key step that we're going to talk about today. And you're right, Becc. Obviously, you told me what it was before we came on, and I definitely miss out this step on the regular, and I'm really excited to reflect on it today because I think this is going to be an absolute game changer. Every time you want to set a goal, whether it's New Year or throughout the year, I think if you do this particular step that we're going to be talking about today, it'll change everything. It could change your life. So yeah, so excited. And Becc, can you give us a bit of context to this, like in terms of your own experience of this and why this is so prominent in your mind at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. And I actually just did this a little bit with myself in my journaling, not last week, but the week before I was actually formally doing my New Year's planning, because I need to do this process with myself regularly as somebody who sets big goals and tries to stretch herself to achieve and participate in, experience things that I haven't necessarily done before. So for me, if I take my mind back to the start of 2024, where, I kind of do that and I sort of feel like a different person. But one of my goals, one of my commitments for the year was to work less, and specifically to work within certain days of the week and certain hours of the week, in particular in my business. And also, with that, I'm juggling all these other commitments in my life, which includes the clinical work that I do, and I guess also primarily my relationship. Then there's my health, the activities that I do for my health, which is a much smaller amount of time. But, having all these wonderful things in my life, which you guys have too. You have all these different wonderful facets in your life, even if you don't have a business, but just juggling your clinical life with all the other important things to you that demand your time, your resources, your energy. We need to somewhat protect the boundaries between those things to make sure we're giving enough resources to each of these parts of our lives. So one of my intentions was to spend less time in my business and more time in what I just like to call life, which is largely about, spending experiences, just being present and enjoying the world, and in particular, spending more time in my relationship and with my friendships as well. So I made this commitment, and it was a bold commitment. It was, I'd challenged myself to spend an amount of time in total per week in my work that was less than I'd ever been able to prove to myself I could do before to get done what I wanted to get done. Because of course with this, I'm not letting go of my goals. I'm not letting go of my mission. I'm just trying to do the experiment of working out how can I achieve what I want to achieve with less time invested. Can I challenge myself to do things differently to achieve this mission with investing less time? And for the first couple of weeks, couple of months of the year, with a few exceptions, I did a really good job of this. I made plans with that commitment in mind, with that goal from the new year in mind. But then, as the year went on, as the year went on, and as not only, my goalposts, I let my goalposts shift a little bit, but also new opportunities came up for me as well. I found myself creeping further and further out of that time commitment of how much time I wanted to spend in my business. And not only, those big, beautiful uncertainties coming up, those big, beautiful surprises, but also the surprises that, in some ways we would probably say shouldn't be a surprise, but I think we stay in denial of them a little bit. Things like us ourselves going through some kind of hardship, whether it be personally or professionally, whether it be us becoming unwell, sick, be it a little cold or something more serious to do with your health or some kind of bigger life change or diagnosis. And then there's all the other demands of life that can blow out to their not so typical time, like a loved one struggling, a friend struggling, someone becoming unwell or mentally not doing their best, and you wanting to then provide more support to them in your total integrity. So all this to say, for whatever reason, I don't think it should have probably been a surprise for me that these extra demands and opportunities would have come up throughout the year. But what that meant was I made decisions over the time, and even quite early in the year, I made decisions that meant that I was no longer pretty consistently filling my commitment to my New Year's goal. Right? Some of these things were somewhat out of my control, and some of these things were decisions that I made. And so what the feeling is that I'm left with at the end of the year, reflecting back and thinking back about the actual goals and intentions that I set for the year, is a bit of disappointment, to be honest. The initial feeling is that, or thought I should say, is that, I let myself down in that way. I set that goal and I didn't stick to it. I wasn't reliable to myself. So the hangover from that can be, especially when you're coming to set goals for the next year in 2025, is this sense of almost like, what's the point? If I set goals and then I don't actually stay committed to them, and if I can't rely on myself, Why would I set these goals? In addition to that, you might find yourself setting smaller and smaller goals because you're less and less confident in your ability to actually follow through and execute on that goal. So as a sneaky little trick that our brains can do is we can try and avoid the pain that I'm feeling right now, this disappointment with myself as I think about my 2024 goals in this way. To avoid that sense of disappointment or whatever other pain comes with that, we can be a bit sneaky and we can just set smaller goals to try and avoid that disappointment in the future. And so the step that I want us to add in to reflecting on 2024 as we think about 2025 is to forgive ourselves. I need this forgiveness right now because of the judgmental thoughts going through my mind, this idea that I've let myself down. And although I don't actually stand by that thought, I don't actually believe that I can't rely on myself, I can't trust myself. If I don't look very frankly and honestly at where I didn't show up for myself and what went wrong, if I don't face the things that went wrong and start to understand what I could have done differently, then that is the thing that's going to break down my trust with myself. If I'm not willing to look at those problems and therefore I allow this story to go on about how actually I did let myself down, actually I can't trust myself, actually I'm not reliable. So I like to spend time, and I want all of you guys to think about, firstly, be willing to go back and look at your 2024 goals at the start of the year. Look at the goals that you let go. Look at the goals you didn't achieve. And let those thoughts come up where you're judging yourself, and especially those thoughts when you're thinking, oh, maybe I can't really rely on myself. And spend a bit of time with them, not brushing them under the rug, but actually looking at what happened and giving yourself a forgiveness for not following through. Regardless of the reason, forgiving yourself for not following through. So Kristeen, I know you're somebody who is not shy for setting very big goals, and so you'll be very familiar with this really tricky situation that ambitious people find themselves in, where we know that we want to set big goals because we want to set our sights high and we want to ask ourselves to rise. But then we're left inevitably with some things we didn't achieve because we tried to bite off so much in this case. So can we just open a bit of a conversation about the goals that we didn't achieve this year, just so that everybody out there can recognize that it's not necessarily a normal thing to set these New Year's goals and then to achieve all of them in completeness and especially exactly how you expect it to.
Yeah, I think it's so important. But I guess before I tell you about all of the things I didn't achieve, I just wanted to give some space to appreciating the ambitious nature of setting an intention to do less and to actually achieve, because you still had very big goals alongside that of everything you were going to achieve. And when I look at your actual year and how much you have achieved, it's pretty incredible. You know what I mean? Like everything you've done this year, I think is beautiful, but it's so sad that you could lose sight of that when you think of, I wanted to work less. And like you say, you got off to a really great start to the point where I was mesmerized watching you. And then it was just bit by bit by bit, life came along and change things for you. And I think it's the same with any big goal that we set. I think a lot of the time there are these constructs around that goal. So whether it's possible or not is one question. Like it was definitely possible to do what you set out to do, and you did it for a while. You definitely showed it was possible. And the same would be true for any kind of big goal. Like, sure, you could become an overnight, I don't know, millionaire or whatever the thing that is that seems so far-fetched. It is actually physically possible. But I also think that we as high achievers, as doctor humans, we become attached to that outcome. Like, so we think it's possible, therefore we should achieve it. And everything we've ever set our mind to, oh my God, we can do, right? So when something comes along that we can't control, I think that the very nature of a high achiever is that they will fall off the wagon a little bit. But also I think we underestimate what's possible within a year versus your 3-year, your 5-year, even your 10-year plan, right? I think like we want everything tomorrow. We do. And I think it's a real trap that we can fall into. So I'm just loving this concept of forgiveness because I have so many things that I did not achieve. So again, like yourself, there were so many things that I did achieve, and I guess some of that was slowing down a little bit in the middle of the year. I think that I tried to learn how to do that too, and I'm sure I was inspired by you and trying to copy you a little bit because you looked like you were thriving. But I think there was a few things, like just really objective things where, I think YouTube would probably be my biggest inverted commas failure. So, as someone who has a YouTube channel, I feel like, I listen to a lot of these other YouTubers and I watch a lot of YouTube and I look at them and I think, oh my goodness, like what a success. And as much as I am so grateful, like my channel is growing, I feel like there's definitely potential for more growth, and I'm disappointed in myself. It sounds like vanity metrics in a way, but that's not my point here. My point is more about my own performance. Like, I know for a fact I have lots of YouTube script content plans that I have not been able to bring to life just for the lack of time and intention, like getting swept away by other things, like just not being laser focused on it. And that has meant that it became my second, third, fourth priority as I tried to just execute everything else I was doing. So it's not that I'm not capable of it in some other reality. It's just in the system that I have going for myself, being in what I would regard as my creative kind of zone of genius, or like where I want to be. When you've got a business, it's trying to get to that place. So I need to learn how to do that. And this year was the year that I guess I really realized that I need to learn how to do that. And so I think forgiveness is going to be a big part of that, because you think, oh God, a whole year of my life, like what a waste. Why didn't I just get closer to that goal? Like it wasn't really so hard. Why were you in your own way the whole year? Which is, if I'm being honest, there were lots of ways in which I just didn't make it a priority. I sabotaged myself and I made other things a priority, and maybe for good reason. The choices I made in the moment were probably the right choices to make in the moment. But I guess this year I'm really reflecting on how I can like accept and understand what happened and really be honest with myself, and then maybe decide, do I want that ambition still, or what do I want to do? Just be more intentional with it and really assess it as like a why do I want it? What's the point? Like you say, what's the point? And that goal and the deadline is coming up for me, like, let's just burn it all down and all the, it's that kind of thing kind of comes up sometimes when you haven't achieved what you wanted. But the truth is, as I'm sitting here talking to you now, I do want it. I really do want it. And the reason for that is because I want to impact a lot of people. And I want to change the way medical education is. Like it's big, it's a big goal. And equally, having not achieved the goal and having consistent results, but not the exponential ones that I had on my vision board. So I think that would be one example.
Yeah. And thank you so much for normalizing that. And I think we could use more awareness, especially for us in medicine. We could use more awareness of what it takes, and specifically how long it takes to achieve really big things. We're used to, as clinicians, having these year by year, chunk by chunk, like even, clinicians work in 1-year contracts often. But to achieve something really big, this 1-year time frame is quite arbitrary, isn't it? So if you want to be able to achieve something really big, and like the change that you're kind of talking about, I know that a lot of doctors who listen do want to add more, something different into their kind of clinical work and lives, and they want to take one of those more creative careers, as we've talked about previously on the podcast. We need to shift our mindset to not just think about, using this 1-year time frame as some kind of like proof as to whether we're going to be able to achieve this goal or not. But as you're saying, we need to be able to stretch this out to, maybe one goal to actually really make progress on it over a 2, 3, 5-year time frame. And the danger is that if we misinterpret it as, I didn't make enough progress this year because I didn't achieve the somewhat arbitrary guess of a goal that I set in terms of what was reasonable and achievable, not only in terms of what's possible, but as you say, in terms of our skill sets at the moment, because we all have skill sets that we can build and improve in terms of our ability to focus, our ability to like prioritize in a way that's really strategic and productive, our ability to not procrastinate and to not make decisions that throw us off our most productive path. Not have that shiny object syndrome is really what I'm thinking about. It's something that I guess fell prey to a little bit this year. But just that if you want to make a big impact like Kristeen's talking about here, and certainly what I'm aiming for in my life, then you can't just judge your success on 1 year. You need to be able to forgive yourself, to be able to have that good relationship with yourself, to be able to get up and go again, to be able to set the same goal for the next year, but to be able to bring in all the learnings that you had with why you didn't achieve it the year before. It's not, oh, I didn't achieve it, so I can't cut it kind of thing. That's not the thinking we want you to have. We want you to bring what you didn't achieve last year, the things that are out of your control, and as Kristeen suggests, also the things that were in your control. You know, the decisions that weren't the right decisions for that goal. Bring that in and forgive yourself so that you can go again, right? Erasing that idea that because you set the goal that it was achievable, because you set the goal that it was achievable for you in that circumstance at that time. Taking on this new mindset of knowing that setting a big goal or any goal in your life is actually not a process of just executing on steps 1, 2, 3, 4. But what it actually is a self-discovery process. Why haven't I achieved this goal yet? Well, the reason is because as I attempt the goal, I'm going to suddenly see, there's this block that comes up. There's this thing that gets in my way. There's this upper limit. There's this habit of mine that's not conducive with me achieving this goal, these kinds of things. So the forgiveness is what allows you to not be so black and white in your thinking and to appreciate that this is an iterative process. You can do things imperfectly. You can do things, frankly, completely wrong. You can self-sabotage and you can make the wrong decisions and you can go after the shiny object and get distracted or just fall off the wagon. And also permission to forgive yourself and keep going at that goal. You don't need to let that goal go just because you didn't achieve it. So for me, I am planning to have, in fact, the same goal in that area for myself next year. I'm planning to have the same time restriction, maximum time for my workload in this particular area of my life. And as a part of that process, what I need to do is I need to look at why I wasn't able to achieve that last year. I need to look at all the things that I don't want to look at, all the things that were out of my control and I couldn't predict, I didn't take into account, and all the decisions that I made that actually took me further away from that goal instead of towards. And with that, I need to forgive myself.
And I think as well as this forgiveness, I think there's also like a touching base with, to forgive yourself and reflect in the way that you're suggesting here, you really have to be quite honest. And I think it's also good to sort of maybe forgive yourself for having lots of goals. Because I feel like that's probably where it comes down to, you got lots of goals, you achieve some of them, you don't achieve others. Whereas if you just had one goal, probably, and we'll be talking about that in an episode very soon, it's just like, what's the one thing, what's the one goal, and having that one thing mindset. But the reality of it is, like, I don't think either of us are built that way. Becc, we have, like, you had this goal, but also this goal, a goal to do this, but in this time frame. And the two things kind of compete with each other ultimately. And sometimes once you get the goal, like, so say for example, say you wanted to open a course, for example, you open the course and then all of a sudden you don't even know what it means to open a course. You thought getting the course open was the thing. That's what I always find. Once you're in there and you're handling it all, you realize like you're in demand. You can't, there's lots of things that your brain can't even compute. And so I think it's beautiful to forgive yourself, but also I think maybe year by year in this process, I'll probably have a tendency to set less goals, but to go after them with more intentionality. And I think that's just another thing to point out. You can have it all, but maybe not all at once.
That's great. I love that lesson. And one of the things that I do need to forgive myself for is fantasy planning. Fantasy planning is when you make plans for, like, we usually talk about the context of a week, but also, you know, you can stretch it out to like the plans that you made for 2024, and your planning didn't take into account all the things, all the other demands on your time. You're planning in a way that just made your goals, like your biggest amazing goals, just like magically fit in, but you didn't take into account the fact that, you know, I don't know, you need to sleep, or you need to have a lunch break, or you have relationships and you get sick and things like that. So that's actually something that I need to forgive myself for this year. And I'm going to be so with you. I'm really excited about this next episode, Kristeen, where we talk about the one thing. So our next episode, we're going to be talking about something that Kristeen and I have learned over the years in setting goals and letting ourselves iterate on the goals. So if you're new to setting really big goals, this step of forgiveness is going to be incredibly important for you, because you're going to set these big goals, and if you set big enough goals, you're not going to achieve them. That's actually what you want. You want to set goals so big that even when you committed your full self and you did everything right, you still couldn't achieve them. But there's such a benefit to setting those really big goals, because it actually calls you to more. It asks you to think differently and do things differently to what you ever have before. And that process of changing the way you think and the way you show up in the pursuit of that goal is why you set the goals, not to achieve them. It's because you become a different person. So when we talk about the changes that we're going to make for next year, we're both going to be taking into account the things that we learned about why we didn't achieve the goals that we set out in 2024. And for both Kristeen and I, a part of that reason that we want to give you guys to reflect on whether you need to forgive yourself here today as well is, were you fantasy planning? Were you thinking also, at the start of 2024, that you could get more done than you thought, simply because essentially you thought there are more hours in the day than there actually are? All right, my beautiful friends, thank you so much for tuning in today for our first episode of 2025. I cannot believe we're here. We wholeheartedly hope that you take a bit of time to set some intentions for 2025. You deserve that. We know that you're more likely to show up to get closer and closer to those goals if you actually set them, if you actually set that intention into motion and start acting in a way that is conducive with those goals. And remember, just because you didn't achieve everything you set in 2024 doesn't mean that anything's going wrong. And it certainly doesn't mean that you shouldn't set goals for 2025. The key here is to set goals to grow. You set goals to move closer to what you want. Don't make it a fatal flaw that you didn't achieve all your goals. Forgive yourself for the places that you didn't show up the way that you wanted to. Forgive yourself for the things that you did wrong in 2024 in terms of aligning with your goal. And then let that knowledge, let that wisdom, let that learning come in to your plan for 2025. And you can only do that, you can only back yourself up to set big goals and charge towards them for 2025, if you keep a good relationship with yourself by forgiving yourself.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in